Good Saturday morning, everybody, and welcome into the Alabama pregame show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. I'm your host, Simone Eli, alongside Michael Casagrande, joining us live from the courtyard in Oxford. Michael, happy game day, happy Saturday, week 11 of the season. Alabama at Ole Miss today, number 10 versus number 11, depending on which poll you look at. A lot of conversations going into this game because of the national ranks, Alabama being out of the national championship contention. Michael, what has the conversations been like when you've talked to Coach Saban, when you've talked to players leading up to this game this week?
Yeah, I guess it's about recalibrating the expectations, the goal. It's truly the first time since 2010 that this team has had the championship effectively taken off the table. It's not completely impossible. It's very, very hard to imagine the scenario to where they could work themselves back into a semifinal. So it's about fighting for something different, and it's rare. It's something that this team, nobody, maybe a few transfers who came from outside the program, but anybody who came up through, as a freshman recruit, they just don't know this scenario. They've the 2019 season, they had the Citrus Bowl at the end of the year, but that was, they had to lose the Iron Bowl in the final game of the season to be out of the playoff picture. So this is 3 regular season games where it's off the table pretty much, and it's not like they get to ease into this. They go right to a rested Ole Miss team with 1 loss on the season. So it's going to be an interesting day.
Yeah, kickoff set for 2:30. It's the CBS game of the week. Alabama at Ole Miss. Michael, we've heard from some players, not only in postgame from LSU, but also this week, saying that some of these guys need to be reminded of what they're playing for, who they're playing for, and what this is really about. How do you take those comments as somebody who's covered this team for quite a while? And again, kind of unprecedented territory a little bit, because this is not something that you're probably used to covering the Tide, that they're used to dealing with. But how do you take those comments?
Yeah, I mean, it's just you have to find it. You have to find that motivation somewhere. You've got to listen to, they got to listen to coaches to see like how, where would they find that motivation. It's just interesting to see a team that's so used to playing for everything. And I think part of it, I'm curious to see, because it seems like that pressure is, as Saban has talked about and other players, the anxiety of that, the huge stakes on every play, every game, weighing on them. If they will come out maybe more relaxed today without that same pressure and anxiety and burden on them, that maybe this will be a different looking team because of that. It's kind of a weird science experiment to see just the motivational differences and how they react to it.
Sure. Will be interesting. Bama looking to bounce back after that overtime loss to LSU. One thing about Ole Miss, Michael, you've written about it this week. It's no secret when you watch this Ole Miss team play, they like to run the ball, whether it's the quarterback taking off. Quinshon Judkins, the in-state guy from Pike Road, one of the best in the country right now, super impressive guy. Kind of getting away from what maybe we thought or what we've seen Lane Kiffin do, throwing the ball around a little bit. They've really stuck to the ground game, and it's worked well, number 3 in the country. What do you see in this rushing attack, and how important is it going to be for Alabama to really try to slow this down?
Yeah, no, it's something that they've always run the ball pretty well. They've always been statistically pretty good at running the ball, but it's been more, they probably threw the ball more than they do now, and now it's kind of a situation where you have to stay disciplined within that running game, because they'll throw it over the top. They've got a lot of big plays. I think their top receiver is averaging 20-plus yards a reception. So it's one of those teams where if you start to cheat down, you start to focus on the running game, put an extra safety in the box, they'll try to throw it over the top and hit you for a big play. So, and some of the run fits you've seen in the LSU game, Tennessee game, they had issues with not huge running plays, not 60, 70-yard touchdown runs, but the 10, 15, 20-yard runs that kind of gash it a little bit that have been an issue. So the size up front has been somewhat of an issue, the battle in the trenches of the defensive line, some linebackers getting taken out. So it'll be curious to see how Alabama fits some of these runs.
Sure. On the other side of the ball, Bryce Young at moments against LSU. Just really didn't look like himself, not really as sharp as we've seen Young in his career in Tuscaloosa. In some moments late in the game, he does his magician-like moves, takes over. Touchdown pass is just one of the plays I'm thinking of. But how much concern is there on where he's at, this offensive line? The weapons have always kind of been a question on the outside, is like they don't really have that number one target like we've seen in the past, maybe 4 or so years at Alabama. What is this offense trying to regroup? Kind of what is the mentality in terms of Bryce Young in that side of the ball?
Yeah, it's a good question because it's an offense without an identity. They truly, I think the lack of a playmaker on the outside at receiver has
Yeah.
truly changed the whole math for how this team operates. It's a kind of there's a preview of this in a sense at that Georgia championship game in January after Jamison Williams went down, when you had both him and John Mechie on the sidelines, and it just truly didn't have that. There wasn't that go-to receiver, and it's carried over. And it's surprising because Jermaine Burton, coming from Georgia, was perhaps thought to be that guy. Tyler Harrell from Louisville he's got one catch, played in just one game. So I think it changes everything. It's tough to see. I've been watching more downfield the last few games, just receivers just not getting separation, not finding any areas within the defenses. So it's just changed the whole dynamic. And this figures to be a game where, Ole Miss has struggled defending the run. This figures to be, this could be an old school game where two teams like to run the ball.
Sure.
If this could be a Jahmyr Gibbs game, we'll see.
Yeah, no doubt. Lane Kiffin, Nick Saban, it's kind of a fun storyline to play with. I don't think Alabama fans really want to make a lot of fun about anything right now, being a 2-loss tied team. But Lane Kiffin seemingly has a lot of respect for Nick Saban. I don't think that's a big secret. He always has something positive to say about the coach. How have you kind of just seen that relationship develop now that they're obviously no longer on the same staff? But, Lane Kiffin seems to be really the up-and-coming coach in the SEC, and someone who, Auburn would love to have. A lot of folks would love to try to get away from Ole Miss.
Yeah, I think Lane knows what he's doing. I think there's some gamesmanship to some of his over-the-top respect talk. And it's funny because Nick Saban's not even on social media to see all the things that he does on Twitter and such. But yeah, it was always a fascinating relationship. When Kiffin was hired here, it was as shocked as I've been to see any hire that they've made. They just seemed like such an odd couple, and kind of remained that way for the whole 3 years. And the way it ended, obviously, was probably predictable. But yeah, it's a fascinating dynamic. They're two very different people, but there are some similarities within them. I'd be fascinated to see them just sit down and have a true conversation.
It truly is interesting. And Lane Kiffin, it's so different, but in some ways very similar as well. It's interesting dynamic. Guys, if you're just tuning in, this is the Alabama pregame show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. Michael Casagrande, Simone, Eli. We are previewing Alabama at Ole Miss. It's the 2:30 CBS game of the week. Been talking about kind of where this team is at mentally, what the motivation factor is. And when you think about what this team is playing for, Michael, a lot of it is pride. A lot of it is just trying to, like you said, kind of figure out what the expectation is, kind of recalibrate what the Alabama football is. Do you think that we could see, I'm not asking you to make predictions here, but with this team being down and out at this point, could we really see a 3-loss Alabama team after tonight?
If you look at the final 3 games, clearly next week, Austin Peay is not a contender. Auburn, you never know. This would be the best opportunity for a 3rd loss, being on the road, given the issues Alabama's had on the road.
Yeah.
Lane Kiffin's probably cooking up something special in the lab. They had an open week last Saturday, so I'm sure there's something special waiting for Alabama when they get there. The point spreads are interesting. I think people were stunned to see an 11.5, 12-point spread for this one, just given the trajectory of the teams. Ole Miss did lose their last game. Well, no, they won. They beat A&M, but they had lost to LSU in the game before that. So, they haven't been as sharp. Yeah, no, I was surprised to see a 12-point spread. I'll be honest.
Yeah, I am as well, especially on the road. Oxford can get exciting. Kickoff at 2:30. Michael, before we let you go, one key to the game, if you had to put it out there for Alabama to get it done on the road against Lane Kiffin and the Rebels today.
Scoring. More points.
Seems important. Scoring, stopping the run. Two things Alabama will look to do today at Ole Miss. Around the SEC, LSU at Arkansas, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi State, Texas A&M, and Auburn. CBS doubleheader actually begins with Missouri at Tennessee. So not a ton of fascinating matchups in the SEC this week, but the big one that a lot of folks will be watching, Alabama at Ole Miss. Not even really the matchup that we thought it was going to be maybe several weeks ago, and we thought this would maybe determine the West. So, guys, we will see how things turn out. Bama, Ole Miss kickoff at 2:30. I'm Casagrande. Thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy the game today.
Yep. It's always a pleasure.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in to the Alabama Pregame Show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. We will see you here for the postgame show. Have a good day.
Medical Properties Trust, at the very heart of healthcare.